we'll begin tonight with a very important topic, a topic about friendship. This is a topic of, I would say it's more important for the younger crowd. Like, and when I say younger crowd, I'm saying like under 30, but it still goes for the, for everybody and anybody until 120 or 150, however old you want to push. So, this also will B'ezrat Hashem speak about your best friend. Your best friend. Who is your best friend? It should be your spouse. That should be the best friend. Sometimes it's not, but that is the goal. So we're going to try to include both of those. I hold this in a very, very high esteem. And in fact, when looking into schools for my children, one of the things that I look at is the parent body and who the kids are going to be with. So, and this I've seen from personal experience, that you have people that are good kids, but they hang around with bad kids, and they end up becoming, they could come from a good family, but they end up hanging out with certain groups, they end up becoming like those groups. As opposed to the other way around, you have people that go and they come from not the best of, strongest of the families, but they hang out with the good kids, and they really get strongly influenced. This is especially true from the teenage years until usually you get married. Then usually, well, the way that it's supposed to be is you're supposed to leave your friends, a little bit behind and focus now on your spouse. Unfortunately, nowadays, with all the double dating and all that, which is an entire class in itself, is, the friends become part of the whole family. So, what was that? You want me to talk about that?
No.
You don't want me to talk about it? Yeah. Maybe we'll see if we have time. Okay. So, to begin, there is a pasuk in Exodus, in Shemot, chapter 23, verse 5. It says that if you see your enemy's donkey lying and its burden is on top of him, he has a heavy weight, then you have to go and you help him. There's a side note that I don't know if we'll get to speak about. What does it mean, enemy? Are you allowed to hate a Jew? What is this enemy referring to? Is it talking about the Palestinians? They didn't want to know Palestinians back then because it just started to come to existence, whenever they decided to call themselves Palestinians. So who is an enemy? So actually there are certain criteria where you're allowed to hate a Jew. And if they don't, and again, we're not going to get into it if it's a habitual sinner that doesn't do repentance after he gets rebuked, does it count nowadays, the whole thing in itself. But then this is why you have some people that just just love everybody which is true, you should love everybody. But there are certain people under certain criteria that it's not a mitzvah to love them. It's a mitzvah to actually hate them. And but granted, now we're not pinpointing at anybody. We're saying in an overall stance that you should love everybody, you should love every Jew, you should pray for every Jew, and you should try to get every Jew to come closer to Judaism. But let's say you're going in the street and you see your enemy, whatever this is going to mean, and this enemy has an animal in his burden. Now, ordinarily, you see your enemy in trouble, you're not interested in helping him. In fact, you'll be like, happy that he's doing that. Not a good character trait, but whatever. Say you had a tough day, and that's the way that you're feeling. And so the Torah says that no, that you have to go and you have to help him, regardless if he's your enemy, if he's your friend, you have to help him. One of the things is you have to show compassion to this is really for the animal, if you realize it, because the animal is the one who's on this heavy burden. But one of the things is that you have to overcome your natural inclination to help somebody else. And this is a very important aspect on it. There's an interesting side note on this particular pasuk. That let's say the guy comes in and, he doesn't like you either. The feeling's mutual. And he sees that you're helping him. He's like, I'm not going to do it. Your mitzvah, you go do it. You don't have the obligation to go and continue helping it. It says only azov ta'azov imo. You only have to help him if he's helping with you. If he decides and says, listen, it's your mitzvah, you do it by yourself, you don't. You're not obligated to go and to help him. And again, what's the halakha? Then let's say, but the animal's still suffering, so do you have to at least do it for the animal? So it's an entire topic in itself. But the idea behind it is that you are required to help somebody, even if you don't like it. Kal v'chomer, certainly if you have a friend that needs help, that needs something, of course you should help him. Of course you should help a friend in need. And this is also an important concept to understand, that if somebody goes and you're there to help somebody else and the other guy has no interest in getting help. The example that I use as often, because I've dealt with this, is like the heroin addict who has no interest in going into rehab, no interest in getting clean. You could go and tell him stories from today until tomorrow. You could show him people that they have to insert the needles into their eyes because they don't have any more veins. You could tell them the craziest stories, but if they're not interested in helping themselves, you can't do it. The same thing with your friend. If your friend is so deep in the gutter for certain things and they're not interested in helping themselves, there's very little that you can possibly do to convince them. The first step really is to convince is that you need help and you should help yourself. There was once two brothers that they had an inheritance, and they hated each other, to say the least. And they decided that they're going to go pay for a wall to be built between their two territories. We'll call one brother America and the other brother Mexico, right? And they came in, and I'm just kidding. There was two brothers, and they really hated each other, and they wanted to go, and they wanted... You actually thought about that, huh? So...
I knew where that was already going.
So the architect came, drew the plans, went into the construction company, they went and they built the wall. When the brothers came, they saw there wasn't a wall, it was actually a bridge closing the two things together. So the one brother said, was like, wow, the other brother wanted to build a bridge, that's so nice. And the other brother said, wow, this guy wanted to build a bridge, that's so nice. And they reunited. Now when they went to pay the construction company, the construction company went to each brother, and they said, you owe us X amount of money. He says, no, I never ordered to have a bridge, I wanted a wall. And the other guy said also, no interested for a bridge, I want a wall. So the construction company said the same amount of material that I would have used for a wall, I made for a bridge. Therefore, pay me for whatever you would have paid me for a wall. And the same idea is there's sometimes the same hatred that you would have for somebody, the same amount of energy that you would hate somebody, you could use that for the benefit, for the good for that person. And if there's like a dislike between two people, there is nothing, what's like people, unfortunately, they like to get it to the other guy. You want to know how to get it to the other guy? Be nice to them. That's going to kill them. They'll be like, I'll give you an example. Two people are fighting. Road rage, right? We all live in Brooklyn, right? So we see this on an hourly basis. So you're in road rage. You're not in road rage. You're sitting there. Somebody else is in road rage. Obviously, two non-Jews that are completely don't follow anything with Judaism or God or anything else, and they're idol worshippers. The scum of the earth, right? And they are screaming at each other. They're screaming at each other, and they want... Now, what happens if one of them stops screaming and he says, you know what, you're right, I'm sorry. So the other guy will start screaming, be like, I don't care, and he keeps on screaming. And then the guy repeats and be like, you're 100% right, it was completely my fault, I really apologize. The more that he does that, the guy, he wants to scream, he has anger, he really wants to get it out, but he's like, and he just calms himself down, he doesn't know what to say anymore. And I've spoken to couples where one couple doesn't show emotion. Not a healthy thing, but one of the spouses gets really upset, really angry, and the other couple sort of shuts down. It's they're just yelling, and the other couple is yell back at me, come on, let's get through this. And they would just shut down, because if you fuel fire with fire. If you put a little bit just calm, a little bit of water, already evaporates the situation. So the same thing that if there's a dispute between two friends, if you just give a little kindness, it goes a very, very long way. And it's the same energy that you're going to be putting in to hate somebody, you'll put in the kindness and you'll resolve the dispute. And by the way, this is some people, they're like, you know what, I'll never be friends with that person again. And for some good reasons. There's some people that, don't deserve to have any, they really bring bad influence, and fine. But there's no reason that there should be a bad feeling. At least that should be taken care of. It's a shame, because there's some people who, there's somebody who walks into the room, everybody hates this person. Just like an annoying person, I just very much dislike this person. And there's no reason, you never know what this person, what amazing friend this person can be, or what an amazing thing that they can do, and people just dismiss it based off nonsense. I don't like the face, I don't know, whatever, as for silly reasons. Rav Nachman Breslov said a story that there was a Jew and a German. They were both hobos, and they were go collecting from place to place. And the German knew, he says, the Jews are more, they give more charity, and that's why you see a lot of people that are 100% not Jews, coming and asking you for a tzedakah. You have tzedakah, and I'm like, and then they'll give you, and they say Shabbat Shalom, and they'll stretch out weird parts of the, of the thing, and they'll be like, well, what accent are you from? Christian? I don't know. And I've asked them once, because someone came over to me once on Purim, and they were like, it was the weirdest tzedakah that I've ever heard. It was it was so many syllables in there, and I'm like, oh, you're Jewish? They're like, yeah, I'm Jewish. And what's your mother's name? And that just threw them off. I felt bad. I was just curious, because my real intention was I wanted to pray for that, they had a certain Assyria, and it was just I get the weirdest name. I'm like, wow, that's an interesting Jewish name. And they're like, yeah. So I'm like, what's your name? It was the same name as the mother. I'm like, apparently this person knows one Jewish name, and everybody's named that person. Later I found out that it wasn't a Jew. Somebody told me it was a gypsy. I don't know what that means. I'm like, what's a gypsy? Who's a gypsy now? What is that?
It tends to be other people.
Is that what a gypsy is called?
They steal things from you.
So this guy.
That's not a stereotype.
Yeah. Okay. So Anyways, this Jew and this German, they were going, collecting, and the Jew said, listen, Passover is coming up, Pesach is coming up. Let's go, and I'll invite you to a seder. Go to a seder. Listen, German and Yiddish is very closely. Just pretend that you're Jewish, and you'll have, a nice big meal after, the night. So he said, fine. They each went in the synagogue, and they waited until one guy invited to one place, the other guy got invited to another place, and the German is sitting over there. The non-Jew German is sitting over there, and he gets invited to the Seder, and he sits down in the Seder, and so what do they come out? The first thing that comes out, Seder. If you ever if nobody's ever been been to a real Seder before, and they go to the Seder, it's like you starve for the first, depending where you eat by, but it could be a few hours. And he's sitting over there, never been to Seder before. The first dish that comes out is salt water for the tears. And I was like, well, what are we drinking tears for? And then he's like, no, so you dip a little tiny piece of celery, a potato, a radish, whatever it is, and you dip that little piece inside, and you sit over there, and this guy's like, oh, this is, I need real food over here. And so finally, a little while later, they get up to the matzah, then finally they get up to mar. They get to the bitter part. This guy finally, he's sitting over there, it's been 3 hours, he's he's starving, he just wants food, and the first thing he sees is, a nice, something dish. He scoops out a big thing, he takes the mar, puts it in his mouth is on fire, and he just gets up and he's like, you Jews are crazy, he's like, I don't know what you're talking about, the meal is ridiculous, and he runs out of the house. He goes, where does he go? Of course he goes to sleep in the synagogue, because that's the place that's open and allow him to sleep, and he goes to sleep in the synagogue, and a few hours later the Jew comes back, fully, satiated. He's coming over there after 4 cups of wine, and he's like, Nusa, how was your meal? He's like, meal? What meal? He says, I eat food that belongs to a cow, and then I ate something that is spicier than anything that I ever tasted in my life. I ran out of there. This place is crazy. He says, no, you should have waited. It was a few minutes later. They would have given you a full, 3-course meal. The same idea is you have when they go into Judaism, and they go into Judaism, they expect, I kept the first Shabbat, give me my wife, my money, everything I want in a plate. Where are you, God? God doesn't exist. I kept Shabbat. I bought people have told me I've eaten kosher today. Congratulations for doing what you're supposed to do. Do you say that when you pay taxes? You go to the government and be like, hey, by the way, I paid taxes today. Like, what do you want, a ribbon? This is what you're supposed to be doing. But sometimes when people go and they become religious, they become more, and they feel like, okay, all of a sudden, where is God? So they just leave everything. They don't wait for it. And sometimes the bitterness, says Rav Nachman Abresav, it's necessary to purify your body a little bit just to get for where you need to. And then slowly you'll see the blessing that comes. The same idea is with friends. Sometimes the friends are a little bitter, and sometimes that's good. Sometimes that's good, and we're soon going to see, sometimes friendship should be a little bit bitter, especially when you're talking about constructive criticism, when nobody likes to hear it. There are many, in fact, I wouldn't say anybody would consider their friends a bad friend. I've asked people that have very bad friends. I'm talking about friends that are addicted to drugs. They're religious, or friends are not religious. And I say, are your friends? Are they good friends? Yeah, they're great guys. No, they're unbelievable. I mean, they have some issues, but they're great people. I'm like, they might be a great person, but they are a good influence for you. Like, no, don't worry about it. And for me, I don't get influence. The King Solomon says like this. King Solomon says in Mishle, in chapter 13, verse 20, it says, one who walks with the wise will become wise, and one who's associated with fools will come to harm. How true is this statement? You go with wise people, you end up becoming wise. You go with idiots and fools who all they do all day is drugs or talk about nonsense and play video games nonstop. You're going to end up becoming just like them. Also, King David, he wrote in Tehillim, the first pasuk, the first chapter, Ashrei ha'isha shelo halach ba'atzat reshaim. Praise is the man that did not follow the counsel of the wicked. This is how he started Tehillim. Make sure you don't follow the counsel of the wicked. And we see also, there's many sources for this. You look up in Pirkei Avot, in the first chapter. It says, Aseh lecha rav, make yourself a rabbi, ukne lecha chada, and purchase for you a friend. Doesn't mean go to the friend store and be like, yeah, I have one place to go. I want a solid one, a really good one. It means that you have to go and you have to acquire, just like you go into, when you purchase a product, you have to do research for it. This is my thing. I research everything. I do tons of research on everything, and that's why you can usually see the classes also come a little bit like that. So when you're buying a product, especially if you're spending a lot of money, you want to research and make sure that it's good. If you're investing in a friendship, you want to make sure that this is a good friend that you're investing with. And buying a friend doesn't necessarily mean here's $100 per week, please be my friend. All right, that guy is not going to be your friend. it's anything but friendship. But what it means is when you're when you're purchasing a friend, it means that you invest in it. You invest time, effort, emotions, and everything that you need in a friendship, and that will grow. And the Pirkei Avot says it's a key to success in life, to have a good friend to pick you up when you're down, especially when you're not married yet. You need this boost of morale sometimes. You need this boost of going towards the right direction. There are people that, that because of one friend, they started coming to Torah classes. There are other people, if they wouldn't have this friend, they would never show up. They're not interested. But because their friend asked them, they'll say, fine, I'll go. The idea also behind this is that you could have a rabbi teach you for hours and hours and hours. And fine, you understand the concepts theoretically, you understand the whole thing. But if you have a friend that you build it together, that goes 1,000 times further than any rabbi would ever go and tell you about it. And I've seen this is tried and true, that when you have, I've seen people that went through the yeshiva system and whatever, they came out like, chatzi. And after they had good friends, and from their friends, they really became like unbelievable. They became like really, and I even remember this when I was in Israel, and when I was in my dorm, and there were people that so you had places where you slept with a group of guys. So you have like every room in my yeshiva was 4 people and 4 people. I've noticed that people that came in strong, but they went in just the dorm. They were just sleeping in the living quarters with people that were not on the highest level, sunk. And the people that were with really strong people, they grew. And you could actually see that they weren't even friends. They were just living together. Like, you know how guys live. You could live together and never say a word to another person. Not weird at all. And it's completely fine. But yet they still got influence. For girls, it's very weird. Yeah, for guys, it's like, yeah, whatever. Like, what do we need to speak about? There's nothing to talk about. Anyways, so remind me of some stories, but I should not say it. Anyway, so. Yeah, maybe afterwards I have time. So the bottom line is one can be more detrimental than a bad friend, and nothing can be greater than a good friend. And I want to share with you a story. There's a story that I read in one of the Holocaust books, an unbelievable story. So Auschwitz, when you hear the word Auschwitz, you usually think about the concentration camp, the labor camps, the severity. But Auschwitz was actually, it was a large city, and they had a large part of a bubble of Hasidim that existed over there. The date was September 5, 1939. And the Nazis marched in, and the first thing that they did when they got into Auschwitz is they took the largest synagogue, the most prominent synagogue, and burned it to the ground. There, they started demolishing everything to make way for the construction of the camps that were to be built. This particular person who's saying the story, his name is Yosef, and he was 13 years old at the time. He had his parents and 4 siblings. They were all slaughtered right in the beginning in the concentration camp. And he lucked out that instead of getting into a concentration camp, he got into a labor camp, which was slightly better. What I mean slightly better, which means is that you didn't have the smell of rotting flesh from the crematorium, is slightly better. The slightly better is that you had a bed that was shared with 6 other men, but you still had, you had a slightly better, existence. The person that was in his bunk was a person by the name of Nachman. He was 26 years old at the time, and he had 2 children. He had a 3-year-old boy and a 6-year-old girl. And his wife was in the women's section. And in fact, they actually let them visit each other. They had like visiting times that they were able to visit each other. But over the course of time, Nachman said, he says, you know what? It's so, I can't live like this. I can't be separated from my family. And he decided that he's going to go and escape. And now, a concentration camp is very different than a labor camp. Labor camp wasn't as heavily guarded as a concentration camp. The fence weren't electric. You were able to, and in fact, this particular concentration camp was near a very dense forest. And a few inmates actually successfully escaped. So it wasn't such a far-fetched idea. So this Nachman went and he orchestrated the entire thing. He had some friends from a Christian background that were able to assist him. And he arranged with his family. And he told his close friend Yosef. Now they were very, very close. This, and Yosef was very grateful for that because he was 13 years old at the time. He lost his entire family, and he felt, this boy Nachman to be as his big brother. They would sit, late at night and tell stories to each other and boost each other's morale and their spirit and speak about what they're going to do after they get liberated and after they get out, and just to elevate themselves. And they got really, really close. They became best of friends. And when he heard that Nachman has to go and run away from he's escaping with his family, he of course didn't want him to leave, and he didn't have an option of going with them. But he understood his predicament, and he says, I wish you only the best of luck. So the morning came when the escape was planned, and Nachman early in the morning, when it was still dark, he wakes up and he gathers his wife and children, and they start making their way out. They start digging under the fence, and they make it under, and they start running towards the forest. But somehow someone spotted them. The lights came on, the sirens came on, the dogs started running, and Nachman started running, and the SS guards were running, chasing after them. As they were covering ground, Nachman saw that he wasn't going to make it. So he took his nearest child and he started whistling the code for this Christian friend to come out of the hiding spot. He saw the Christian friend in the distance. He took his daughter, was 6-year-old at the time, and he threw her as far as he can to the Christian. And he said, "Run, run, run, run!" And he sort of blocked whatever he can of the SS guards. The daughter got away, but him, his wife, and his son all got caught. And when you're escaping the concentration camp, it's not like stop, don't do that again. You get timeout. That's not what they do. What they do is they gather everybody gather around, and they ordered Nachman to start digging a hole. And he would start digging a hole, and as he got to the hole, he lined up, the Nazis lined up, it was a hole big enough for 3 people. They lined up the boy, the mother, and the father. They aimed their rifles, and all of a sudden, one of the leaders of the camp started running over. He says, "Woody, stop! What are you guys doing?" He says, "What do you mean? This guy escaped. We're ending it right here." So he says, "No, you can't kill him. He's my best guy. He's the only one who knows how to work the bulldozer." So the SS guards were like, "Okay," but he says, "But you don't need the wife and the child." And the guy says, "No, not at all." So they made him sit and watch his wife and child get murdered in front of him and get buried in the same grave that he dug out for himself. And he got back to the bunk that night, and he just, it was a night that tears just never ended from his, from his eyes. And a short while afterwards, when he sort of recuperated, it was very interesting because Yosef is saying the story. He says, he didn't become a Muslim. He didn't become a dead man living. He actually still gave a lot of attention to Yosef, and he still tried to boost, and they boosted each other's morale. And he kept on speaking about his dead wife and his dead child, but he kept on obsessing about his daughter. His 6-year-old daughter is out there somewhere. It's like, well, I wonder what's going on with her. And a few months go by this way, and he says the person who's saying the story says he'll never forget the day of Nachman's death. It was the 4th Dalet Tammuz, the 4th day of the Tammuz, which is in the summer. It was 4:00 in the morning, and the guards burst into the room, and they find Nachman, they pull him out, and they bring him right out to the same place that he buried his wife and his son, and they said, "Open it." And he didn't know what's going on, and he opened it. Apparently it came back from the high Gestapo headquarters that, his ability to live, did not, if he tried to escape, no matter how good he is, he's getting killed. And he dug open his grave with his wife and child, and he, Yosef is saying the story. He says, as he stood up, and they made you stand up or get on your knees before they shot you. He turned around. Nachman turns around and he scans. They call the entire camp. Everyone has to watch this. They woke everybody up at 4 a.m. to watch this, and he scans the entire crowd until he finds Yosef, his close friend, his 13-year-old friend, and he sees them and he screams to him in Yiddish and he says, "Yosef, remember, I have a child." And that was and then suddenly was silence, and then the silence was broken by a large gunshot, and then Nachman's body fell limp, where he reunited with his wife and son in Gan Eden. And Yosef said, he said over there, he was shocked. He couldn't even say. He knew that he had a mission now. No matter what's going to happen, if he survives this, he will search the entire world for his best friend's daughter to make sure that she's okay. And so they got liberated. It was January 1945. It was that they liberated the camps, and they went and first thing that he did was he started looking for all his family members. He had 50 family members in the area, this guy Yosef. And he searched from place to place, could not find a single family member. So the next thing that he started doing is searching for, this daughter, this girl, Chayla. And he searched first for the family, and he found that her entire family, besides her parents, were all also killed, except he found one living brother. That living brother's name was Leibel. This guy, he searched high and low until he finally was able to find him. And he said, "Listen," he says, "your brother, had a daughter and she escaped. You have to find her." And he says, "Of course, I'll do whatever I can to find my brother's, lost daughter." And they both searched, they both sort of separated their ways, and even though Nachman told his, this girl's uncle to go find her, he still felt that his words were directed at him, and he's the one who needs to go and needs to find this girl. And he even said, listen, if maybe his brother's not up for it, I'll adopt her, I'll take her on, whatever it takes. He feels he owes this guy everything. So time goes by, and Yosef gets married. And he, through the intervention of the Baba Rebbe, he was able to immigrate to the United States, and he lived in the Upper West Side of Manhattan. And in 1958, he continued, throughout this time, he continued looking for this girl, Chayla. He's like, where is she? He searched everywhere. He sent letters to every newspaper, searched for it, and nothing doing. He ended up speaking to someone who said that he saw this guy, this is the brother of this guy, Nachman, with a little girl, and they know that they made an aliyah to Israel. So when he heard they made an aliyah to Israel, he started sending out and putting out ads in paper week after week. If you know anybody about this, please contact me, which was very common after the Holocaust. This is how people tried to reunite with family members. But nothing, no bait. In 1958, the Baba Rebbe was going to visit Israel for the first time. So he was lucky enough to be part of the entourage that would go and visit Israel. And he went, the first thing that he did was search everywhere, visit every orphanage, every place that he could possibly think of that maybe would have some sort of information on this girl. And he found nothing. And when he returned to his visits, 1962, 1964, 1968, 1970, every single time he intensified his search, but still came back with nothing. He ended up having 5 children. And incidentally, 4 of those 5 children married Israeli spouses. So his trips to Israel increased in, bar mitzvahs and weddings and brises and all these things. So he kept on coming back to Israel. Every single time, his main focus in life was still to find this girl. Finally, somebody went and told him, and this was in 1986. Somebody went and told him, and said there's a museum in Tel Aviv that has a list of all the children that came to Israel via the youth aliyah from Europe. He says, go in there, they have a list, maybe you'll be able to find it. So he went, he searched, and he actually found the brother of Nachman's address and information of it. He was so happy. The first thing that he did is he took a taxi straight, no matter like cross country. He took a taxi, went to visit this person. When they met, it was just full of tears and reunion and shrieking and excitement. And finally, they broke away and they were like, he asked him. He says, Yosef asked him. He says, so where's Chayla? So he's like, oh, Chayla. He says, she came with me to Israel, and she says, what a wonderful child, what a wonderful person. She got married at a young age, and then unfortunately at the age of 23, she died of cancer. So he was like, what? His whole life came crashing down. He says, he feels, like he promised this. He felt like this was what he needed to do for Nachman, and he felt so empty, so void inside. So then, the brother says, but, there was a daughter. And he's like, well, a daughter? He's like, well, tell me more about this daughter. He says, to be honest, I don't know. She was, 3 years old when Chayla died. And, I don't know. She's like, so tell me where she is. Let me go find her. And he says, listen, Chayla's husband, after she passed away, he remarried very quickly. And the wife very cruelly insisted she doesn't want to raise anybody else's children. And you have to send her to adoption. So they placed her in an orphanage. And being the fact that, Chayla and Nachman's brother didn't have good terms, the husband would refuse to tell him which orphanage they were placed, and I have no idea, where she is and what's with her now. So now Yosef, he stopped looking for Chayla, and now he intensified his search now for Nachman's granddaughter, this little girl. And years passed, and he still refused to give up. Every time that he went to Israel, he used to keep on visiting. At a certain point in time, Nachman's brother passed away, but he kept on visiting his widow. And he kept on pressing her, maybe you have any information. Like every visit, it was like he was an annoying guy, like kept on bringing it up, kept on rehashing it, come on, get me something. And she's, whatever she gave. Finally, years go by, and she gets a phone call, and she's shrieking. She's like, Mazel tov, Mazel tov. He's like, whoa, what's a Mazel tov? I was like, what happened? You had a baby? What's going on? And she's like, I found the address, and I found the name of where this granddaughter lives. So he happened to be in Israel at the time. He ran. He took a taxi straight to her, and with his daughter Rivka. He went, and she wrote the name and the address on a piece of paper, and she handed it over to Rivka, the daughter of Yosef. And Rivka opens up the paper. She looks at it. She turns white and she faints. She literally falls on the floor, fainted. When she gets when she comes back, she's like, she goes to her father and she says, Nachman's granddaughter, her name is Hindi, and she's my best friend for the past who knows how many years. Says, I married the son. She married the son of a big rabbi. He married a student of a big rabbi. Their husbands learn together in the same place. They're so close. These two girls, they do everything together. They go to classes together. They do chesed together. They go walks together. They do everything for the children. Everything's together. This is her best friend. So the right away, the first thing I did is they took another taxi right to the. And by the way, Israel taxis are expensive. So this, so
It's for a mitzvah.
yeah. They take right away to meet this Hindi, and they reunite. And Yosef says a story. He says, like this girl Hindi became a fifth daughter to mine, and celebrated all the family celebrations together. And he continues the story, and he says, the story's still not over. He says years after that, he went to do a tour of Poland with his rabbi. And they went to visit, like Auschwitz. They went to visit all the grave sites of the holy people, and they noticed in the Hasidic grave, cemetery, there was, after they prayed by the big rabbis, they noticed something very peculiar. There was a sort of an enclosed, like a little tiny graveyard with like 3 graves inside, right in the middle, and it looked really out of place. So out of curiosity, Yosef went and looked at it, and when he looked at it, he's like, how's this possible? It's Nachman, his wife, and his son are all buried in the same thing. And then he did a little bit of research, one phone call to the cemetery place, and it turns out that Leibel, the brother of Nachman, went and did after the liberation of the concentration camps. He went and arranged that they should be removed from where they were buried and put in an actual Jewish cemetery. And he was so emotional that he started crying and saying Tehillim right in front of his very close friend and his wife and the son. And when the rabbi, after they were finished, they're walking and see how emotional he was over there. The rabbi walked in and says, "Is everything okay?" So he told him the whole story of what happened from the beginning of Nachman and his friend and his daughter and everything. So the rabbi says, it will be an honor. Let's say Kaddish for this family. And he says, please. So they gathered 10 people, and the rabbi went and led Kaddish for this, for this family. And Yosef says, he had a feeling that, this, finally the circle was complete. The circle of true friendship, of true undying love. He felt that he was able to do something for his friend. That is what a real friend does. That no matter what happens and how many things he went through in life and how many things he could have said, okay, fine, you know what, it was long ago. No matter what, he kept on continuing and kept on. And what happened? How miraculous. You see how Hashem works, how God works, that even though he couldn't help it, he didn't know, but his daughter was helping this girl for like already 10 years, 5 years, who knows how many years she's been helping him as a close friend. So you do what you can do, and you don't know what God is going to be able to do. Most of our, friendships, unfortunately, sometimes, unfortunately, other times, they occur by themselves. Why are you friends with this person? I don't know. We took a bus together once, and then, 2 girls, and we start talking, and then that's it, The next thing they're best friends. So the idea with friendship is sometimes you have to go and actively go and chase after a friend. Somebody who's good, go and try to become friends with that. Don't be one of those knowing people. Be like, hey, want to be a friend? 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 Hey, let's be friends. That's like weird and it's going to scare people away. But you have to actively pursue good friends, not just let, whatever happens, happens. If you have a bad friend, get rid of that friend. The Mishnah in Pirkei Avot says that you have to distance yourself from a bad neighbor, and don't befriend an evildoer. Because it says in the Gemara, it says, woe is to a wicked person and woe is to his neighbor. The Bartanur explains in this, and he says, that if somebody goes and becomes friends with somebody who's a rasha, and you really have to think if your friend is a rasha or not, because nobody thinks that, oh yeah, my friend is a rasha, my friend's an evil person. But if you know what they do, they might be, okay, listen, maybe it's better to distance away from these type of people. But let's say you don't, and you connect to this type of person, then when this person gets paid back from God, and it's not going to be in bonuses, when it gets paid back, it says, then everybody in his surrounding circles also are going to go get paid back from it. So it's something that you have to know, and you shouldn't be one of those and say, listen, it's good for him now, he's having a good life, he's very wealthy, very successful, let me be friends with him, maybe I could get something out of it. Unfortunately, this is how people, think. So you should never say that, he's going to get paid, in the next world. God could pay in an instant. And if you happen to be in that vicinity and you're close and God's paying him, you're in the same boat. Whether you're evil or not doesn't matter. You're getting paid equally. So it's very, very beneficial to stay away from that. Even more so when you're friends with somebody who is a wicked person, people tend to flatter their friends. Like a friend calls up like, oh my gosh, I did something terrible. What'd you do? No, it's not so bad. You are so stressed out. It's okay. Don't feel bad. Because they think as a good friend, I make the other person feel better. I'm like, no, just the opposite. If someone does something wrong, a good friend says, you're an idiot. You're a fool. He says, what are you doing? What do that is what a true friend does. A true friend doesn't go and flatter somebody. And unfortunately, by the way, it's a sin to flatter an evil person. You have to think about also, the Tana doesn't tell you to always be worried. There's some people that they're always scared of everything bad happening. Oh no, this guy, I know he's a sinner. He says, I'm not going to stay away from him, I'm going to stay away from him. So you're constantly worried, okay, he's going to get punished, he's going to get punished. That's not healthy also. But at the same point, don't think that God's not going to pay back the sinners. God pays back everybody equally to, exactly the payment that they deserve. And, there was somebody who was, overly, righteous of himself, if I may say, that, everything is okay. And this guy, his name was Haman. He thought nothing bad is going to happen to him. And you see what happened with him. So you should never underestimate the power of payback, I guess. You can use that word.
Good, so you get paid back on that circle of good things instead of bad.
Absolutely, yeah. Everything's measure for measure. The Rambam says also, there are many people, even before I get to that, there are many people think that I don't get influenced. I get this all the time, and I laugh at their face. I'm like an evil laugh. I'm like, I'm like, you think so? I'm like, you fool. You like, oh yeah, I don't. I speak to people, and I'm like, there's a guy that I spoke to, and he says, I started, he came to my class and he started speaking nonsense. Like, he started asking questions, the Torah, is this really, why would God say this? Is this really what God says? It's the rabbis, not this, it's not really legit, it's always the rabbis, everyone blames everything about the rabbis. So, I was like, what's going on? I'm like, this guy was so good, he was like such on a strong path. Later I find out he started hanging around with the wrong crowd. So I spoke to him in private, and I said, listen, you're hanging around bad crowd. It's like, no, but I'm making him better, and I'm like, come on. I'm like, who are you fooling over here? The people tell me this all the time. I knew a person that he befriended someone from the opposite gender for kiruv purposes, strictly. For obviously. And it wasn't long. It really wasn't long before she did kiruv on him. In not a Torah-dika way. So it's and what happens, people think like, oh no, I'm going to be strong enough. This particular person that I'm speaking about, he felt so strong. He doesn't even know about it. You don't realize when you fall. He started questioning this. He started he stopped praying. He stopped doing all these things because he thinks he's not getting influenced. People don't even realize when they are getting influenced and when not. There's a story told. The Ben Ish Chai brings down the story, and he says that there was once a man, a very wealthy man, who lived in a city that was, a bunch of wicked people that were living there, and he needed to live there for whatever reason. And his daughter was getting ready for marriage, and he wanted only the best. He was able to afford the best. Was able to pay for a guy to send and learn for the rest of his life. So he went over to the nearby yeshiva and the nearby town, and he goes to the rabbi and says, I want your best guy to come and marry my daughter. I will, he would live a life that he could go and devote his entire life for Torah. So the rabbi went and picked out one particular guy. He says, this is the best guy. If you could promise that, he'll gladly go. They worked it out. It was Mazal Tov, and the guy went and he moved in with, back then you would move in with your in-laws. He had an attic, and he took the entire attic, the father-in-law, and he basically gutted it out, filled it up with books. He says, you have your whole Bet Midrash over here, and books was very expensive back then. He says, book, you have all the Bet Midrash, you never have to leave over here. So the son says, son-in-law says, what do you mean I'm going to stay over here? He says, well, let me go out, let me go. He's like, you don't understand, the people here are very wicked, you can't mingle with them. He says, no, what do you mean? He says, maybe I could go, I'll be Makar of them. He says, Torah is like a light, a small light dispels a lot of darkness. He says, maybe I'll be able to. He says, you don't understand, the father says. These people, very bad people, stay away from them. And they always argued back and forth, let me go, I can do it, I can do help. The father-in-law says, you don't understand? No. Finally, the father-in-law saw that he wasn't getting the hint, so the father-in-law came up to him once and says, listen, I have a question for you. And he says, being that you're a very learned man, he says, I was in the kitchen, we had a large pot full of meat, and a non-Jew happened to come in, and he accidentally dropped in a piece of non-kosher meat into the stew. So, is it allowed? Am I allowed to eat it? Are we not allowed to eat it? You're the chacham of the town. What's the halacha? So, he says, the halacha is very simple. I have to go inspect it. Let me see. I have to see how big the piece of meat was, how big the pot was. And he goes, the son-in-law looks at the meat, he looks at the pot, and he says the whole pot is bad. Not only that, you have to also put the pot in scalding water. You have to, cleanse it in its essence. And the father-in-law says, I don't understand. He says, but it was just a small piece. He says, yes, but this small piece added to the flavor, and hence everything is not kosher, and you have to dispose of everything. So the father-in-law said, fine, if this is the halacha, I trust you, I believe in it, and I accept it. The whole thing is in the garbage. So the next day, the father-in-law gets up to the son-in-law and says, you're not going to believe it. He says, I made a deal today. We're going to have the most delicious meat that you have ever tasted. So the son-in-law says, well, what do you mean? So he says, I was in the marketplace, and as I was walking, I bought a small, piece of meat. And as I was walking, there was a Gentile store selling, non-kosher meat, and my meat accidentally fell in his meat. So I said, based on the logic that you gave me, if a small meat piece, it turns into the small meat of non-kosher turns the entire pot into non-kosher food, which means there's a small piece of kosher can turn the entire pot of non-kosher food into kosher food. So I purchased the entire pot. We're gonna have a delicious stew for tonight. And the son-in-law is turning all colors. He's like, "What are you crazy?" He says, "What do you mean?" He says, "Who ever heard of such a thing? A piece of non-kosher meat can make kosher meat non-kosher, but a piece of kosher meat cannot make non-kosher meat kosher." So the father-in-law smiled and he says the same way. He says, you're a little piece of kosher meat in a non-kosher town. Don't think that you could go into the kosher town and think you could change everything. And a lot of people think this way. They think, and I'm not saying that you can't do kiruv. You have to do kiruv. You have to help it. But you have to be careful at what expense. There are certain people that they mingle and they're the only guy who keeps Shabbat in the entire crew. I'm like, come on, what do you think is going to happen eventually? Eventually you're going to end up becoming like them. Not that they're going to become like you. People think they're stronger than they really are. For men, I could say this 100%. I don't know about women, but men think they could accomplish anything. Pick up a house? Sure. I need to work. I need to stretch a little bit, and we could do this. And they can do anything, and they think they're invincible. Could be. I think women in this area would probably be the same. No one. Yeah. So, what you need to do is you need to actually go and proactively look for a good friend. And if you have a bad friend, then you have to be proactively removing yourself from your bad friend. And I've told this to people all the time. I'll give you some tips on it. That there was one, some people, have told me that, it's very hard. They have a bad friend, but what are they supposed to do? They've been friends for like 100 years, which literally means in girl time, 6 weeks. So they say, I've been so close to this person, I can't, what am I supposed to do? So I said, it's a very simple tactic. If you don't want to get uncomfortable, just always be unavailable. For the beginning. Like, okay, we're going to hang out, we're going, I don't know, whatever girls do, pick up flowers. We're going and I don't know. Coffee, okay, that makes sense. So,
No.
I'm sorry, I insulted you if you're going for drinks, okay. Shopping would have been a better answer. Girls like flowers, was I that wrong?
We don't go shopping for flowers.
All right, never mind. I take it back. So
yeah, the men buy the flowers
I'm sorry,
for Shabbat.
Yeah. All right. So wait a minute. So this whole flower business is a fraud.
Yeah, of course.
I have to speak to my wife.
Yeah, the men are buying the flowers.
No?
It's not a thing.
It's not.
It'd be a nice errand, but it's not a thing with the girls.
It's a good thing you have to write notes. All right. Good thing I hear about this. So.
My husband bought me lottery tickets instead of.
All right. A bouquet of lottery tickets.
He's like, you killed him anyway.
So, anyways, you become unavailable. They call up, they say, hey, listen, I want to hang out. No, I can't, I'm busy, I'm doing whatever, I can't go. And eventually, you'll slowly drift away. And eventually, you hang out once in a blue moon as opposed to once. And it slowly becomes easier not to hang out. Thank you very much. It becomes easier not to hang out. So that's a good tactic. I mean, obviously, it's best. If it's a bad person who's causing you to fall, you stop it immediately. That would be the best. And we see speaking, about Shevet Reuven, Dasan and Abraham, they were wicked people. But it says, the Chazal tell us that why did they associate with Korach? They associated with Korach because they were in the vicinity. Shevet Reuven was right near Shevet Shimon, and because of that, they were associated with the vicinity, and because of that, they fell into the into the trap. And this is why.
Wasn't Korach influenced by his wife or something?
Ah, yes. Next thing we're talking about. Who is?
Oh, that and Open Palace.
Yes, that's exactly where I'm leading up to. So,
Sorry.
yeah, it says also you have to distance yourself from a bad neighbor. Now, who is your closest neighbor, your closest friend? Your spouse, either your wife or your husband, depending of which gender you are. Which I have to say that nowadays. So, being that as it may be, you have to be careful how you choose your spouse. If you choose a bad spouse, this is going to be, the end of you. You're going to be slowly on a decline. A person always has to make sure and they seek a righteous spouse. You look at On ben Pelet versus the wife of Korach. Wife of Korach goes over to him and says, why are you working for Moshe? As if he was working. He said, why are you following Moshe? Go start your own business. Go and get into your own. Let them follow you. And he says, you know what? You're right. Maybe I should do that. And his wife pushed him. I don't know if she thought it was the right thing, but he pushed him basically to his demise and her demise as well. On Ben Peletz's wife, she went and she says, I don't understand, why are you following Korach? He says, whether you're following Korach or you're following Moshe, you're still not the first guy. You're still not the main guy. Stay away from them. What are you going to deal with that? And he says, no, I can't. I promise them. My word is a word. I have to go with that. So what did his wife do? Fed him some wine, made him fall asleep, and then made sure that the men didn't come into to wake him up.
But what she did, was that allowed?
That's why I specifically didn't say it, because I don't want to get to that. So it's an interesting, well, maybe we'll speak about it afterwards, we have time. It's an very interesting topic in itself. She uncovered her here to show that she's immodest, so then all the Korach's followers were like, everyone thinks they're righteous, no matter they could be stealing from the bank, still give charity. So, they go and they say, no. He says, what do you mean? He says, that she's not a modest woman. We don't want anything to do with that. Because of that, it saved her her life. And her husband's life, because they all perished, they all died. This is one of the ideas, is that there was, I had a close student of mine that was dating a girl, and this girl was, and he didn't even tell me this until afterwards. This girl was not the best influence on him. Kept on, telling him stuff that he should do, and telling him stuff, and not like like against the Torah way. And eventually, they broke it off. And he said, I realized that she was just pulling me down so hard, and I saw where my life was going, and I was like, you know what, I don't want it. And he broke it off. Now, Baruch Hashem, he's married to a very good girl who pushes him to learn, pushes them really strong to learn. And Baruch Hashem, very happily married. But there's sometimes when people in the dating world that they date and they end up losing a lot of their spirituality. They end up falling very, very strong. I know a couple that I've said this story before because this is something that it's constantly in my in my mind, that he is doesn't wake up, doesn't go pray with a minyan, doesn't put on tefillin. She is not modest, and so I go to I forgot who I spoke to. Says, why don't you tell him to wake up and start going to minyan? So I can't, because I'm not modest. And then I spoke to him, like, why don't you tell her to start dressing up? I was like, I can't. I don't go to minyan. I want to tell her not modest. So instead of helping each other grow, they helped each other fall down more and more. And this is, unfortunately, sometimes you go and you by the way, the person that you meet, the person that you end up marrying, is how you're going to be for the rest of your life. Some people say, listen, we'll grow together, but you're going the wrong way.
I would say that's different from me and Alex. You changed so much from the last 3 years.
Yeah, because you grew together. But you didn't come in. How did it start? Started with Alex, no?
Well, it started with me before we got married, and then
And then it went with Alex, and then you superseded him. Yeah, but you see how it is. You guys are helping each other grow, as opposed to one person pulling the other person down. And when a person's not strong enough, that's what usually happens. That's why I tell everybody the general rule for dating is date somebody slightly higher than you. Just slightly higher you in the spirituality. Because if you go slightly lower,
But how do you know?
should be higher, or the girls should be higher?
the girl should think the boy is higher, and the boy should think the girl is higher.
But how do you know?
So you know you could tell by their actions.
You can tell by their
It's a Jewish answer.
There's two different opinions. One person says the guy should be higher, one person says the girl should be higher.
Well, it depends who I speak to. If I speak to the girl, the guy should be higher. If I speak to the guy, because everybody can be higher in a different aspect in itself. The idea is, first of all, there has to be a need to grow. If there's no need to grow, a guy's like, yeah, no, I'm cool where I am right now. I think I'm good. Run away.
Really see that on a date?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
You didn't need to answer. All right. So, there's some people that say, in general, in the first dates, I'm looking to grow. I'm a very spiritual person, and I'm just completely involved with Judaism, and they know nothing about Judaism. They know nothing about God. They know nothing about Judaism, but they call themselves spiritual. They call themselves that. You have to be perceptive enough to see where this person is holding. Look, you can see little things. Do they make a bacha? Do they make a ba'an nefashah? How do they think of themselves? How do they dress themselves outside? Do they go to prayers? Do they dress like a Jew? Some people don't dress like a Jew. Don't dress like a Jew. I don't know what they're afraid of. You live in Brooklyn, New York. Everybody's Jewish. In fact, people like to do business with Jews. They're like, oh, he's Jewish. He must have a lot of money. Let's do business together. And so, but people still, for some idiotic reasons, decide not to dress like a Jew. As if they're allowed to do that. Halachically, it's a very big problem in itself. But people fall so, and I see this all the time, day in and day out. They're falling, and they don't even realize it. And that's the saddest thing.
Opposite?
That they grow?
Yeah.
I do see that they grow.
Give me some hope here.
Yeah, well, it depends who you marry. I'm talking about the negative. But I've seen plenty of people that they got married and they became so much stronger. Like, I was shocked. I have a very close student of mine that he was I don't want to use the word lightly, but he hated God. He very much disliked God to the tense that, there was a certain, whatever. It was very, very bad relationship, let's just say that. And he got married, and it is I would never have expected that. Like Shabbos, kosher, Yom Tov, he wants his wife to be tznius. He wants he's coming to learning Torah, and it's something that I'm shocked. Sometimes I'm really surprised about where people end up. And this guy was like, and Baruch Hashem, he got lucky that he did it. But not everybody gets lucky. Some people they'll go and they go whatever. I fell in love. Oh, I fell in love. What could I do? What can I do? I fell in love. That's it. I'm there. It's something that I gave a class. I gave a class recently for the men on a men topic, and oh, you ready to send it? Okay. So.
Who are you sending it to?
So.
You're censoring it.
Yeah. And it's very interesting because so I have to be careful what I said because I said that. And I have to whatever. But. I can't even, I would have to stop in mid-sentence because what I'm about to say, people are going to be able to figure out. It might be Lashon Hara, so I apologize. I can't continue with the story that I just said, and it's my mistake because of the how I started it. But the idea behind it was where people go into a relationship together and they think that's it. They're sold together. And I'm not saying, let's say somebody's dating and they see themselves falling. I'm not saying that's it, end it. You have to go and try to work it up. Make sure that you're going in the right path. This is so important because whoever you marry, that's how your children are gonna grow up. I heard this, I think it was this week from Rabbi Zachariah Wallerstein, which is so true. And so I heard of his class, I think it was this week, if I'm not mistaken, the first few minutes of it. And, he was saying how there was a story where there was a woman, I think it was a Jewish woman, that was standing on the 5th floor in Coney Island. I don't remember how long ago this was, in the Jewish area, and she was going to jump. And the policeman, the negotiators came, everybody was trying to convince her, nothing was doing, she was going to jump. And you can't intimidate her because if, you have to work very carefully because then they could jump if they'd be intimidated. So they found, there was a Jewish guy walking about, they're like, I don't know how this even came about, they're like, you're Jewish, she's Jewish, maybe you could do something because we can't do anything. So he said, fine. And he goes and he speaks to her and he says like this, and he says, he tells her and he says, listen, he says, you want to kill yourself? You can kill yourself. He says, but you can't murder the 4 children. And she's like looking around, it's like, children? He's like, what 4 children? He's like, what are you talking about? And he's like, when you're jumping, he says, you're murdering your 4 children that are supposed to come out from you. He says, they will never come into the world because you're jumping, and you have no right to murder your children. And she heard that, she got off, and she went down, and they took her, whatever, obviously, to the mental hospital, which this idea is so true. I don't know the details of the story. This was in Coney Island, I don't remember where it was. So, but the idea is that when you're dating somebody, this is how your children are going to be raised. Now, if you want to live this way of your life, that's your prerogative, that's your decision. But who gives you permission to destroy your children? Who gives you permission to have your children be raised in a secular place? Who gives you permission to go and put your children in an abusive relationship because the guy has anger issues or whatever it is? When you're thinking about this, you're not getting married. Just you have your children, your grandchildren, your great grandchildren, and this is an unbelievable idea. This is such a genius. So let's say you're dating somebody or you're friends with somebody. The first thing is always try to raise them up before you dump them. Obviously, try to raise them up. Try to bring them closer to Judaism. And if one person starts raising it up, generally speaking, the other person does it. And this works the same way if you're married already. If you're married already and your spouse is down spiritually, and the other one, you try to raise them up. You have to tread carefully, especially dating wise. Why I like to speak about dating, because dating is easier. Because the guy could be like, hates exercise with he's allergic to exercise. People told me that. So I'm allergic to like, how could you be allergic? I'm allergic to my own sweat, which apparently is like a thing. It's a real thing. So so I didn't realize, but people are like, they're allergic to cold, they're allergic to this, which is, I'm not judging anybody on their thing, but there's some people that are like allergic to becoming better people also. But what happens is when you're dating with somebody, so you're always like, oh, madame, please, I open the door for you. Yeah, of course. Afterwards, after you're engaged, you'll be like, you're like, come on, Hong Kong, the door is open, let's go, we're late. And, so things change. So when you're dating, it's very easy to change a person. After you're married, it depends. Depends how whipped the other person is. But generally, it's more difficult. So That's why I like speaking specifically on the dating path. But this is of utmost importance. If you're supposed to have a good friend, and if you're required to have a good friend and required to have a good neighbor, all the more so are you required to have a good spouse. And you have to make sure, and if you're married already, don't be like, well, you're not good, I'm going to find somebody else. No, it's obviously something you have to work on together and grow together. So now, the Torah speaks about, and it's getting late, so we're going to wrap it up in a few minutes. The Torah speaks about the idea of having a good neighbor. Now, when you think about it, like, who cares who your neighbor is? You live in Brooklyn, you don't even know your neighbors. When do you say hi to your neighbors? When you see them somewhere else out of Brooklyn. Be like, oh wait, you live on my block, right? Be like, hey, how's it going? Like, nice meeting you. And all of a sudden you're like chit-chatty, like all of a sudden before, like never before. And you're like talking for like hours. Meanwhile, you see each other in the street the next week and, you give them the nod, the Brooklyn nod.
I went to my neighbor across the street today, and I spoke to my next door neighbor today.
For the first time?
No, she lost weight, she looked good, so I called my
Be like, so what are you doing? Like, what pills are you on? No, I'm just kidding. So, who's your doctor? All right, I should stop now. Anyways, so yeah.
That's a really bad example because she's my neighbor.
Oh, really? So no, but that's good. So you have a good neighbor.
No comment.
See how I flipped that? But the idea is, when you think about it, why does the Torah tell you to have a good neighbor? What's neighbor's pleasantries? Hi, nice to meet you. Good morning. When's the garbage out? Okay, alternate side. Whatever. You speak about the weather, right? Because that's a very important topic everyone likes to speak about. The weather today. Yeah, unbelievable. I can't believe it. New York. Like they're blaming New York for their weather. Yesterday was so nice. What's going on now? I know. So I never understand when people speak about the weather. It just like I don't understand like
Small talk.
it really is, but like it's like
not your neighbors. That's like my Italian neighbor across the street. God bless her. I could be there for a half hour, and I'm like, oh my God, what did I do?
yeah.
No, it's no exaggeration. I don't know how she does it.
Let me taste a little bit of a pie.
No, she's a sweetheart.
Yeah.
But it's like it doesn't even start from the weather. It's just how's everything?
Yeah.
She's telling me when I'm getting my windows done.
Oh really?
It's amazing.
Oh, that she's a yenta. Okay, good. All right. So the idea is, so what's so important about neighbors? And this is something so important, especially people that are looking to move out, looking to buy houses. This is a very, very important concept. That neighbor is a completely different influence than a friend. A friend is always a friend is by your side when you invite them, when you go out. A neighbor is always by your side, day in and day out. They're always there. But the difference is like subtle. The neighbor sets standards. When you're in a community, there's certain standards to the community, and you have to live by that standards because you feel to be an outsider. I've heard this example once. So let's say you're in an Orthodox community and you drive to the synagogue because you're not Orthodox and you're very comfortable with your religious affiliation, and you drive to the synagogue. What happens the first time you pull into the synagogue parking lot? Everyone's like, children, don't look at the person, so. Even though you might be comfortable, you'll be like, you feel really bad. No one wants to be an outsider. No one likes to be an outsider. So you want to, you delve into the same community. It's the same idea. If you're in a certain community, and there are certain communities people speak to me about moving, and I'm like, I wouldn't move there. There's certain. I've been there a few times, and you see how people live there. There are certain communities. Tzniut is not a thing. Like it's everybody bless you. Everybody, skirts above the knees is a normal thing over there. It's not where I would want to raise my daughter to, where she walks out on the street and she sees somebody in shul who's also there with also a skirt above the knees, because then she becomes thinking, okay, this person's religious, this person's religious, must be, it's allowed, which is 100% not allowed. But so you become influenced by the society that you live in. You become influenced where you are in. This is why in neighbor where you're living in, the Torah says find out where your neighbors are before you rent, before you buy, because this is going to depend on who you are. If you go and you end up moving to Bnei Brak, if anybody doesn't know what Bnei Brak is, you take Bar Park, the most strongest Hasidic religious place possible, and you take that and you times that by 1,000 to the 100th power, and then you go to Bnei Brak. That's it. Or you go to Mea Shearim. The places are just like, if you wear colored clothes, you're, there's already a problem as itself. But let's say you move over there. Let's say, for whatever reason, you move over there. And, even though your ideas might not be the same with them, you'll still start acting similar to that. And eventually you'll becoming that. I know somebody who ended up living in a very, very religious, he was like very secular. I'm saying he was absorbent. It was like, I shouldn't say secular, very modern Orthodox, very modern. And because of the area that he lived in, He became very religious, but to make matters even more interesting, his children became like rabbis. He would never, he's like, I asked him, like, how did this happen? I have no clue. I don't know. I have absolutely zero idea, zero recollection on why and how they became like this. The neighborhood makes a very, very strong influence on you and on your family. There's a Mishnah in Pirkei Avot. I'm going to finish soon. So, no, I'm kidding. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. I apologize.
I'm good. Now she'll be away. I embarrassed myself enough.
Okay.
You'll have it.
A what?
Women in general, for example, with mixed community, I think you had everything.
Right, so so it depends who you associate with. That's why Brooklyn, I don't feel is a community. I don't feel like it's maybe the Syrian has their own thing, the Gorski, it's exactly, right. So it's that, but generally you move anywhere else except for the area, it's like everybody's with everybody. You have a Hasidic guy and one neighbor, then you have a Sephardi guy, and then you have an Ashkenazi guy, and then you have a Yemenite guy. You have like everybody just like a big mix. So Brooklyn, you could really be in so many different communities. You could be in a certain place, but you could be part of it. But if you move to out of town areas, you really become like the out of town thing. What? Lakewood, Lakewood is a good example. Yeah, Lakewood is a good example. The problem is Lakewood is growing so much now that there's other subset of communities now that are building up from that.
Lakewood is so busy.
Long Island is also a good example. Yeah, they're more. Yeah.
What else Staten Island?
Staten Island feels like it's part of Brooklyn. I don't know, but I don't know much about Staten Island. Huh? That's not. I don't know. Oh yeah. I don't know a lot about Staten Island. All I know is they have a something with the garbage goes there. I know. I don't know if that's true or not. It's not there anymore? Okay, that's all I heard about it. Okay, anyways, so the Mishnah Pirkei Avot says, Rabbi Yochanan went and asked the student, he says, go and see which is the best trait that a person must acquire. So one person said, a good eye. Another person said it was a good friend. Another person said a good neighbor. And we're going to focus on the two people that said a good friend and a good neighbor, which means what is the best trait to have? They didn't even speak about themselves. They said, no, get a good friend. That's the best trait to have. And the other one said, Rabbi Yosef said, no, have a good neighbor. The Bartanura says, what is a good friend? A good friend is someone who rebukes you. Do you know what a good friend is? A good friend is when you're doing something bad, he or she, obviously the same gender we're talking about, he or she is going and they're going to tell you, no, you're doing something wrong and stop it. I remember this so vividly. I think I even said this story once. It was before, this is when I was still single, years ago, and I was driving back from Lakewood after spending Shabbat there. It was maybe 1 or 2 in the morning, and I was there, me and my friend. Even tell you, it's a very close friend of mine from Australia. Even tell you his name. His name was Benny. I'll tell you that. So now, if he's listening to this, I wonder if he's going to remember this. So, very close friend of mine from Australia, and I remember this so vividly. We were driving back. It was 1 or 2 a.m. in the morning. We were driving back, and I don't know, it was like an hour and 45 minutes, hour and a half drive. Let's just say that, and because we weren't speeding, we were going right on the speed limit. Everything was kosher, and. The entire ride, he was giving me rebuke, like nonstop, and it was it was constructive criticism, and I wanted to open the door and push him out without stopping the car. I even told him, I'm like, dude, stop. I'm like, I get the point, stop. He's like, mate, I'm not gonna stop. He's like, because I love you, and he's like, I care about you, and he he gave it to me over the head again and again and again and again. And to be honest, I don't even remember what it was about. All I remember was how annoyed I was. That's what I remembered. But I remember afterwards, after that hour and 45 minutes of constructive criticism, I appreciated it because I ended up listening to him. Because that is a good friend. A good friend is not like, oh my God, you did the worst sin. Don't worry about it. You're such a good person. You have a heart of a gold. I've never met such a beautiful heart and blossom into flowers. And that's what people do.
Yeah,
that's what people do.
Bad.
Right, but that's not the thing that you're supposed to do. That's why you're coming to class to learn. What are you supposed to say? That when you're
awkward, man.
Yeah, it is. It's not comfortable. No one likes to be doing you're a bad person. You did a bad thing. Obviously, you don't say it like that. But you should go and you have to obviously do it in a constructive way. And it has to be in a nice way, in a polite way. It can't be downgrading. The way that you give criticism is that you don't downgrade the person, you downgrade the act. You display, how could you do that? You're such a good person. That's so not like your type to do that thing. You should really do repentance, you really do tshuva. It's a really serious thing. Yada, yada, yada. It's not a class on rebuke. But, yeah, of course.
Do you have a class on rebuke?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Aren't you not supposed to give rebuke right after because you're supposed to assume they did tshuva?
If it's a righteous person, then you're supposed to assume they did tshuva. But if you see someone doing something wrong and they confront you and they say, hey, listen, I did X, Y, and Z sin, you rebuke them. I've had people friends growing up, they would tell me these things. That they don't speak to me anymore, probably for this reason, because they'll tell me like, hey, I did this, and they were like bragging about it, and I'm like, dude, that's a very big, sin. That's a very, you have to do tshuva for that. And he's like, yeah. Anyways, and I go through like, I'm like, didn't stop me. It doesn't bother me. But no, this is what you do as a friend. You have to give constructive criticism. I was speaking to this group of people, and we were speaking about, I gave this class recently about one of their friends was dating a non-Jew. And we were speaking about how to go about doing it and what he's supposed to do. And it turns out that they all went to public school, every single one of them. And I was like, you know what? I'm not surprised. Did he meet her in public school? And they were like, yeah, I met her in public school. I was like, this is why you shouldn't be in public school. So what do you think? You're going to public school. You're there with girls or the opposite gender, which don't dress at all. I don't think they even have a dress code in public school. They do? Oh, Baruch Hashem. But I guarantee you it's probably very nothing. So, I don't know.
Like sketch rules.
Oh, it's like you don't have to believe it. You don't have to follow it.
No, depends what public school you're in. In New Jersey, they don't have.
Depends what public school. So you got to go public school.
That's
half dress.
My yeshiva is right near a public school. So sometimes when I pass by it, I have to pass. I see the kids going out in public school, and this is like I stopped going that route because I'm like this is not a school that whatever, I won't call out names, but yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
No, that place scares me. I went to public school. I didn't go to public school like that. That place is crazy.
That place is I have students that have been to that school. They call it Yeshiva Maro. And I'm like, if that's where you're going to yeshiva, then that it's a reform yeshiva, if anything. Anyways, so but as I was speaking to them, it turns out we were going around the table seeing who's keeping Shabbat and who's not, and then we convinced everybody to keep Shabbat. But we ended up to one. It turns out one kid, he was 16 years old and he's in public school. I'm like, aren't you learning from your friend? And the other, his brother was here. He's like, no, you don't understand. He will never do it because I will kill him if he does and he dates a non-Jew. I'm like, oh, and what do you think his brother said about this person who's dating a non-Jew? As if they think, no, it's okay, I could go to public school, I won't get influenced. Are you crazy? I know people that went to public school. I deal with them. They are so influenced. And you cannot tell me this originally education. I'm like, come on. People in public school, I've spoken to people. Education is definitely not what they're not getting. Especially in the, Morrow, FDR, all these places. There is no education over there. I am like, education maybe strict, how to deal with a drug dealer, possibly, but further than that, it's really important how to know how to speak to a drug dealer.
It is though, it is.
I guarantee you can have plenty of street knowledge without it. There's plenty of successful businessmen that went to yeshiva, and that probably, if you want to go percentage-wise, I guarantee you there's more in that than the public school thing. So, anyways, let's finish up over here with two short stories, and we'll call it a night. So, this story is a true story that happened on Saturday night, March 21st, 2009. Is that a special date? Or, okay. So, there was a group of terrorists a story happened in Haifa, in Israel. A group of terrorists went and they put a car full of explosive under the beams of a mall in Haifa. And the idea is that it would explode, and once it explodes, it's going to go and light the other cars on fire and hopefully break down the beams and crash it down. So, unfortunately, and due to a miracle, a complete miracle, there was a group of people that were walking by and they saw smoke coming out of this car. And they notified the authorities, they came back, and even the Israeli prime minister at that time, who was nothing close to religious, he said this is a tremendous miracle, and he himself said a tremendous miracle. They were able to diffuse the entire situation. But what really happened? So listen to this unbelievable story. There was, a few weeks beforehand, there was a young girl in Haifa who was having tremendous pain in her stomach. And they went to get tested, and it turns out that there was a very large cancerous growth in her stomach. And the doctor says that it's metastasized, it's spread, it's too late, we can't operate it. The best advice that they can give her is, for the next few weeks, go home, stay home, and be with your family. So, as any family would do, they started begging, like, come on, this is a little girl, do the surgery, do something, you never know what could happen. Finally, after begging, they decided, what are they going to do? Fine, for the sake of the family, they'll try the surgery. And they put in a very new doctor, like someone who doesn't have any experience, figures this will be good for him experience. Anything, according to medical science, there's nothing that can be done for this person. So, the girl went into was getting ready for surgery, and this girl comes from a non-religious family. She went and she started praying to God. Usually there's no atheists in a foxhole, and she started praying to God. And she said, "Listen, in the time of the Holy Temple, we will be able to give you a sacrifice, but now we don't have any sacrifice." So she decided what she was going to do. She's a teenage girl. She went and she took all her modest clothing, and she took it out to her yard, and she lit it on fire, and she told God, "This is my sacrifice to you." So this is my sacrifice to you. The next day, she went to the hospital, and her only piece of clothing that she has left, which was a nightgown, which happened to be modest. One piece of clothing, she burnt everything. She was in it a full 100%. And when she went under surgery, to some miraculous astonishment, to no one's understanding, the tumor was never metastasized. It was very small, and they took it out. It was benign. There was nothing even problematic with it. And when she recuperated, when she got home, she went and she gathered all her friends, and she told her, she said, "This is what happened, and this is exactly the reason that it happened about her modest clothing." It wasn't too long before her friends brought in all their immodest clothing, and they also burnt the entire, all the immodest clothing. That Saturday night that they found that bomb was the time where all the girls went to buy the modest clothing for the first time, since they burned their clothing. That's why this story was unbelievable. This is why the story, the entire mall was saved in the merit of these girls. I want to finish with one final story, which is an unbelievable story. There are times that your friends or your spouses, they get you upset, and you have to think about the bigger picture. Is it really worth it to get upset over stupid things? I mean, you're in the heat of the moment, so yeah, you get really angry. But there are certain things that whatever, just leave it. It's not the big deal. So he left the toilet seat up, right? So there was a person by the name of Yankee. He married Rivka, and they had a great marriage. They married for 15 years. They had 8 children, and Rivka was expecting in the ninth child. And this person Yankee, the husband, he was very, very. You know the story? This just is. All right, whatever.
Probably have eight siblings, dude.
All right. Well, so, anyways, so there was Yankee was a very neat person. He was like a neat freak. Everything has to be exactly the way it is. Generally, how does it work? When you married, exactly the opposite. Rivka was everything was all over the place. And every time, the husband would get upset, she would tell him in Hebrew, "Zelo chashuv." Zelo chashuv means it's not important. Don't worry about what you're going to make a big deal, so it's a big mess. Big deal, who cares? Zelo chashuv. Fine. In the summer, they would go upstate. They had a bungalow upstate. And Rivka and the kids, you okay there?
Now I'm going to ask you also. Leave it alone.
So, all right. So, so now, all right. So I'm not cutting anything. All right. So she, every time that's how they would diffuse the situation. They had a bungalow upstate, and during the week he worked in his business, and from Thursday till Sunday night he would go up to the mountains. So one Thursday afternoon, he gets a phone call from his wife, Rivka, and he says, "Listen, honey, we're out of checkbooks. Can you please give me can you bring up a checkbook?" And he says, "Yeah, not a problem. I'll bring up a checkbook."
Oh my God, 5 years old,
After.
So he goes and what?
Change the name, will you?
Oh, is the name? Okay, I'll change the name. Okay.
I think that's where she's
Okay, fine. So, anyways, the wife
There we go.
keeps on calling like 4 times to the husband. "Did you forget the checkbook? Did you get it?" He's like, "No, I told you I have it. It's in the bag already. I put it in the tote bag. It's coming up. Don't worry about it." And she kept on calling him. He's like, "I need the checkbook." He's like, "Yeah, it's coming up to you." So Thursday night he gets up over there. He puts he gives her the tote bag, says the checkbook is in here, and he goes and he does his thing. Friday afternoon, right before Shabbat, he opens the door for the kids' room, and he sees the tote bag is hanging on one of the bunks. And he goes in to peek inside, and look, the checkbook is right there. And he's getting really upset. She's like, she called me 4 times. So important. Yet she didn't even take it out of the bag. But he figured, he says, if I'm going to ask her, she's going to say, "What? Zelo chashuv, it's not important." You know what? He's not going to say anything. A week goes by. He comes back, he goes back to the city. He works. He comes back that Thursday night. That Friday afternoon, he goes into the kids' room again, and he sees the tote bag still hanging in the same place. And he's like, "If that's still there," he walks up, he peeks inside, he's like, "Oh yeah, it's still there. It didn't move since the previous week." She called him 4 times to make sure that it's there, and it's still standing over there in front of the kids. The kids could take it and start drawing on it. So he decided still he's going to hold himself back, and he's not going to do it. Another week goes by, same Friday, The checkbook is still over there. And he's boiling, but he calms himself down like a good husband, and he ignores him. That Tuesday, the following Tuesday, he gets a phone call from one of the neighbors in the bungalow colony, and he said, "Listen, there's something wrong with the wife. She went. There was some complication in the labor. She's in the hospital now. Get here as fast as you can." He drops everything and he drives straight up to the mountains and to the hospital that she was there. Unfortunately, by the time that he got there, the complication was very severe, and the wife passed away. Yeah, his wife passed away in childbirth, and he was beyond himself. He was, eventually, they calmed down, be like, you have to make some sort of preparations. He went to the bungalow to take a few things, and he saw the bag hanging out on the bunk, and he looks inside, and the checkbook is still there. And then he started coming to a fresh set of tears. Right, again, he took out the checkbook that he brought up for her, and the first 2 checks that he made one of them was for the funeral home, and the second one was for the Chevra Kadisha. And and afterwards he took the bag and he inscribed in the bag, "Zelo Chashuv." This is not important. There's many times in life that we go through our friends and we go through our spouses, and they upset us and they cause us problems. But when you really think about it, you think about these 3 words, it's really going to take you a far way. Zelo Chashuv. It's not such a big deal. You have a good friend, you have a good spouse. Don't fight over the small stuff. Make sure that you treat them, and it's so important, grow together. You have to grow together. If you're not growing together, very, very, very big problem. And if you're dating and you see that this is not going anywhere, big problem. It is a reason to stop. Even if you see that it's just going down, that is a legit reason that it's going to to stop. Obviously, speak to a local Orthodox rabbi, someone who's well versed in it. But if you have a friend that's bad and it's not growing and it's just bringing you down, you stop being friends with that person. Choose your friends wisely, and choose your spouse even more wiser. Questions?
Yeah, isn't there some kind of line where it's just too much, you're just putting everything away? Everything is just, okay, fine, I'll let this go.
Obviously, it has to be a relationship. You can't just boil inside, because what happens when you boil inside? Eventually, it's a nuclear explosion. So it has to be, you can't keep everything inside. Communication is very important in marriage. And if you don't have good communication, it's a very bad thing. People go through marriage and they're like, okay, I'm not going to talk about it. I'm just going to, what is it called? I'll suppress it. This is not healthy.
How do you know how much to suppress and how much to...
The key is good communication. If it bothers you and you want to say it in a very calm way the next day. Don't say anything yet. So bring it up next day, say, this bothered me a lot, when you're relaxed already, and this is the issue, we need to work on this. And that's always, you're already not so angry about it, and you're able to deal in a more, logical perspective as opposed to an emotional one. Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
Yes. With Oven Ben Palace, his wife.
No, his wife. Okay, we'll do that at the end. Any other questions before we get into that?
No. Yeah, I have another one. What's considered a bad friend? Someone, what do you mean by someone who's...
What is considered a bad friend? Somebody who is a habitual sinner, constantly doing bad things against the Torah, and bringing you down also. Even if they don't bring you down, but if they're just a bad influence, think of it this way. Would you let your daughter or your son hang out with that person? And if that would be maybe not, then you should.
Habitual sinner, someone who's not snoot all the time,
Depends if they know this. Yeah. So it depends. It really depends on it's scenario by scenario. Are you getting influenced by them? Are you like, oh, that's a really nice dress, I want to wear something like that, and you're like, okay, it's very difficult for you. Then yeah, it's not healthy for you to be with that. If it's something that's all they do, but they don't really know about snoot, they don't really know about it. So, this is where you would go and bring them to a class about snoot, or send them a class about snoot, or talk to them about that. And if you continue seeing that they're not changing and they're staying the same way, then it's not going to be beneficial for you. Especially if you get married and they get married, they're going to live, eventually your children are going to become friends. You don't want your children hanging out, with something like that. You might think that you're strong enough, but you always know you want to protect your children. Especially like a mama bears, right? So protect your children by anything. So the same idea, that would be a good concept. You already love them, even though you don't know. That's a good thing. That's very smart. Any other questions? Off the camera. No, I'll tell you. Okay, questions off the camera. Okay. Okay.